Welcome to another episode of Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them. I'm your host, John Braddock, author of the Amazon bestseller, Click Here When I Die, and the founder of My Life and Wishes, an online planning and document storage solution created to make things easier for those you love. So this show is about the importance of estate planning and why everyone needs to do it. But unfortunately, there are consequences that occur if people don't plan. So on this show, as you know, we have real conversations with real people and share real stories. We aren't here to elicit fear by any stretch of the imagination. We're simply here to educate and get people to think about their own life and their own personal situation. And today I'm excited to have another episode and being joined by attorney Joshua Love. Let me tell you a little bit about Josh. Josh is a licensed financial professional and an estate planning, probate administration, trust administration, and guardianship and conservatorship attorney at Pennington Law, which has offices located throughout the greater Phoenix, Arizona area. With a deep-rooted commitment to prioritizing his clients' interests, Josh goes above and beyond to deliver a personalized approach that tailors each estate plan to your unique needs and desires. Now, Josh's passion for estate planning was ignited by personal experience and a genuine desire to make a positive impact in the lives of others. Witnessing the challenges his own family faced following his stepfather's passing, primarily due to the absence of a proper estate plan, and then, of course, the burdensome probate process which follows, Josh was inspired to make a real difference. This personal connection fuels his dedication to the field. He focused his legal studies on probate and trusts, determined to spare others from the same hardships he and his mother endured. This personal commitment to the well-being of his clients ensures that you, the client, receives the highest level of care and attention throughout the entire estate planning process. Welcome, Josh.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm excited you could be here with us today. Say, Josh, as I always start out, I like to ask people about their passion, the why they do what it is that they do. So could you share with us a little bit about your personal journey and your personal experience with your family's challenges following your stepfather's passing?
Sure. So I was a little late to life as an attorney. I didn't actually come barred until a little later in life, but one of the things that led me to seeking a law license was actually my stepfather's passing. And when that happened, my mother and stepfather had gotten married about a year and a half prior to his passing. And when that happened, my stepfather had wanted to place my mother onto their home, the home that they lived in. And not being educated people, not being overly educated people, they had sought the only place that they figured they could have that done, which was the bank. So they had gone into the bank to have my mom added on, and they walked in, and stepfather said, "I need to have my wife added on to my house." And the bank, being the bank, said, "Well, we'll just refinance. That's how we'll add her on. Rates are good right now. We'll get you a better rate, and we'll add her on." Well, they sure refinanced. They put my mom on the mortgage, but they didn't put her on the property. They didn't put her on the deed. So when my stepfather passed away from stage 4 lung cancer a year and a half later, my mother was left having to navigate probate after she lost the love of her life.
Wow.
So it was very difficult to see. And at that time, I had just finished a late graduating with my bachelor's in political science. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I said, I'm not going to watch other people do this.
Wow.
So I started applying to law schools. And that was my drive in law school, was to help other people through this.
Wow. That's amazing. So yeah, you don't think about that, especially if you don't have a lot of those experiences. You know, a couple comes together, they get married. It's like, hey, honey, I love you. This is our house now. And so yeah, the logical thing is you go to the lender, right? Um,
Yep.
but I would assume far too often lenders don't have or possess the added knowledge to guide the people to say there's some certain steps that you need to take to get him or her listed on the title.
No, and I mean, in that situation, my mother's literally, after my stepfather's death, my mother was left with a mortgage she was liable to pay for a home she didn't own.
Wow.
So
So tell
without
me
a
about
proper
that
estate plan in
process.
place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so tell me about that process, if you don't mind sharing, because I know some
No,
of this
not at
stuff,
all.
gets personal.
No.
So your stepfather passes away, and so now mom uh, has a mortgage on a home that she doesn't own. What are the steps that she has to go through, and then the timing, and then the cost?
So the steps are just probating it just as if it were a home that was paid off, except she's still liable to continue paying the payments. So not only does she have to go through the excessive cost of paying for a probate in that situation, but she technically doesn't have the right to the property that she's making the payments on until it goes through probate. So my stepfather had a son from a previous marriage. So now my mother is the sole person responsible for making a payment on that property, but she's only entitled to 50% of it.
I was going to say, was there some family issues, or what happens during probate now? Because you can see, especially if there wasn't a good relationship, someone coming in and saying, hey, I'm going to fight you for that house and you're going to pay for it.
Yeah. Luckily there's no bad blood in our family. We're lucky with that. I've seen enough of that. We can get into that later. I also did probate litigation before I got into the practice I'm in now, so I've seen plenty of that. But the there was no bad blood in this situation. My mom actually just offered to because she felt my stepfather's son deserved something from the estate, so she offered to give him 25% from the sale of the home. And he graciously accepted that. So he's going to take 25% of the sale of the proceeds. When my mother sells it, she's been going through the probate process now for 3 years. This is in California. So we're not, she's actually been going through the second stage of the probate process now. It's been, I don't mean to steal the thunder of the show, but it's been a nightmare. It has, I graduated law school in 2019, and it started shortly before I started law school in 2016. So it has actually been, we're coming up on 7 years of going through this process. Because we fought with the bank for close to 2 years to try to get them to rectify the situation that they had created before we opened probate, and which they refused to do. They said there was no error on their part.
And so through
So
this whole time, your mom's still making payments on a house that yet legally she still does not own.
correct.
And wow. And so, and obviously she couldn't, turn around and sell it. God forbid she fell on hard times and had struggles to make the payment. Being the good son you are, I know you would step up and do that for mom, but wow, that is a nightmare. And what kind of costs? I mean, California is California, right? Sorry to all my California listeners, but so it probably costs 10 times as much out there as it does in a normal part of the country. But I think I just might upset a lot of people. Sorry. So what can it cost? I mean, the time in of itself is a nightmare, right?
Yeah.
But what's the cost of going through that?
Well, at this point, we're lucky that really the house is the only asset at issue. My mother and stepfather were joint on most of the accounts. She was a beneficiary on all the rest of the accounts. So the house was the only thing at issue, but that's still, I believe she's at this point, the attorney's fees that she's paid is close to $10,000, which, I mean, doesn't sound like an awful lot to some people, but you know, my mother is not well off. So it's not a drop in the bucket. And I know most people understand that. So it's, and when my mother's retired, she lives on Social Security income, $10,000 is a lot of money. And it can be especially a lot of money when you're trying to deal with making a large mortgage payment every month that you're now responsible for making. So, and again, it's a simple solution, right? If he had a will, if he had even a simple will that designated everything to her, estate planning can solve a lot of these problems. So that was one of my main drives in understanding. I needed to understand when I went to law school, and that's why my focus in law school was on probate and estate planning. I needed to understand what the fixes were and how to help people avoid what I had seen my mother go through.
Right. And so, a lot of people think when we talk estate plan, they're thinking bigger picture, right? They're thinking full trusts and those kind of things, which are extremely important because they do a lot of beautiful things, obviously. But with no will in place, intestacy, probate, those kind of things. As a reminder to our audience, having a will is an amazing first step, and everyone should have one because that does indicate where things, what your desires are and where they should go. But it does not avoid probate. However, in your situation,
but my mother would not have had to give away 25% of the house.
Right. And I would assume the probate process wouldn't be taking as long.
Not nearly as long.
Wow. So the big takeaway here is what?
Get your estate plan in place. Come see someone. Come see me. Come see someone like me. Go see an estate planning attorney. If it's not a one size fits all solution, that's one of the things I always tell my clients. It's about fitting the solution to the person. A trust isn't a one size fits all solution. A will isn't a one size fits all solution. It's about the assets you have and about the needs that you have, and making sure that you have something in place to make sure that your family is taken care of when the time comes.
Absolutely. And that's, that's why I love working with estate planning attorneys and talking with them. And that's what this show is really about, because, it's, for the most part, 90% of the estate planning attorneys I speak with have a story. There's a reason they're doing what they're doing. I've got a lot of friends that are personal injury attorneys and stuff like that. And, they can't give me a good, clear reason as to why they do what they do, other than maybe a lot of money. But estate planning attorneys have seen it or lived through it and experienced it. Much like, my background, I was, I had an employee benefits company for 30 years, and losing a loved one and going through the nightmare put me on a completely different path of trying to help millions of families avoid the nightmares that actually await. But the biggest one of all, they're all going to be there, but the biggest one of all is if obviously you don't have an estate plan. But so, Josh, what do you believe is like the most common misconception or misunderstanding that people have about estate planning or the process, other than it's only for rich people, which is crap?
Right. And, the biggest misconception I see with clients when they come in and sit in front of me, or potential clients when they come in and sit in front of me, is, well, I've got to be rich to have a trust. That's always the biggest misconception, right? Trusts are only for rich people. That's a rich person's thing. And more we're starting to see, once I sit down and explain kind of how trusts work and what the benefits of trusts are, more and more people are saying, well, that's what I need. That's what I need. I know I don't have millions of dollars. I don't have this, I don't have that, but I thought I needed that for a trust. And when you explain what the benefits are, they actually say, well, that actually makes more sense for me than the will does. So that's often a misconception, right? Is that you need all this money for a trust. And the other thing is they think trusts are going to cost tens of thousands of dollars, which is obviously not true. I have lots of clients that trusts are very affordable. A simple, basic probate avoidant trust is not excessively costly.
Right. Yeah, I had a discussion with a gentleman a while back who's a friend, and I was asking if he had a estate plan in place, and because he has some adult children, just much like I do, and he has some means, so there's some assets involved here. And so I was asking him, I said, do you have an estate plan? You got trust and all these things put together. He's like, no, I know I probably should, but I really just don't want to spend that $4,000, or so it's going to cost me right now. And so, being the smart butt that I am, I said, hey, don't worry about it. Don't. You're right. Don't spend that. I said, because when you die, your kids can spend $30,000 taking your estate through probate. So, what would you rather do? Spend a little bit now, or let your family spend a ton of money that they might have otherwise been entitled to receive? And, then he called me, a word that starts with an A and ends with an E. And, but other than that, it's wow. Hey, so again, beating a dead horse, we know it's important to have an estate plan. But I know estate plan is not a set it and forget it kind of proposition, right? Life changes. So can you just briefly discuss the importance of these ongoing reviews that I know your firm does, and have a program for your clients to actually keep things up to date, because that shows how much you care. But what's the big factor?
Sure. I mean, everyone needs to review it on a regular basis. Life changes, right? Life, to quote Ferris Bueller, life moves pretty fast. So and we get caught up. I have so many clients come and sit in front of me, and their excuse is always, well, we've had this on our list for years, right? We tend to get pushed to the back of the list as estate planning attorneys for years and years and years. And so one of the things that we wanted to make sure is, once we have an estate plan in place, we want to make sure that we don't keep getting pushed to the back of the list. So what we've developed is our customer care plan, is designed so that once a year, you're going to get a letter that reminds you, hey, we haven't seen you in a year. We want to remind you that you have a complimentary meeting that you can come in, sit down with us. Let's talk about what's changed in your life. Let's see if we need to make changes to your estate plan. Let's see what changes may need to be made, and catch up. Make sure that we know what's going on in your life, so that we can make sure that there isn't anything that needs to be done. Typically, there might not need to be anything done, but it's important that you check in with your estate planning attorney to make sure, because sometimes people don't realize that the changes that have happened in their life might equal a change in their estate plan. So it's important to kind of check in. I typically tell people changes usually happen when something in your life equals buying a house or bigger. If it feels like buying a house or bigger, that's probably when a change is going to occur in your estate plan. But it's never a bad idea to come in and check in on a yearly basis, just to make sure that everything's going to run smoothly.
And I'm sure there's many people out there who have a trust, and they sell a property, and they go buy a new property and don't think about it, and they forget to title the home in the name of the trust.
Oh yeah, it happens more often than not. I've seen 3 clients this week already that moved to Arizona from another state, and they came in to get their trust checked over to make sure their trust was going to work here in Arizona. And the first question I always ask is, well, when you moved, did you make sure to get the house titled into the trust? And out of the 3 people that I've met with, 2 of them did not have their house when they moved here titled into the trust. So it's a common mistake. It's a common issue. So it's definitely something that's another reason we try to encourage people to come in and just check in with us, right? Because it gets overlooked. And oftentimes you'll tell the title company when you first start the process, yeah, we have a trust. And then somewhere along the lines, someone kind of forgets to follow up. And although you said it at the beginning, by the time you get to signing, you're not really paying attention to the documents. You're just going through the signing because it's, 200 pages long and you're just signing everything that gets put in front of you. And it doesn't get put in the trust, even though you started the process thinking it was going to happen. So it happens. So it's a good idea to kind of check in with your estate planning attorney, make sure that things are going according to plan.
Yeah, and I really like the way you do it. At Pennington Law, that you really care and you take the time to meet with the clients and really find out about the client and what their needs and objectives are. Because you're right, there are no two that are the same. I mean, I look at my brother and his wife; they've been married for 36 years. They have two sons who are now adults, and they're married, and so they need to adjust their plan a little bit. Michelle and I have a blended family of 6 children. So it's a little more complicated with things. Now, some are getting married, and some, most don't need as much life insurance from us that we may have left to them. And so, in our case, we review our trust every week with our estate planning attorney, just to and he asks us all the right questions, things that we don't think about. So really kudos to you and what you are doing. I know we're winding up on our time here. Is there any question that you can think of that you're like, man, I wish John asked me that question?
Sure. I wanted to just touch on the fact that one of the things that we're very adamant on here is trying to match the estate plan not only to what suits the person best, quote unquote, but also what suits the person best for their time of life, the time they are during their life. So more and more we're seeing clients that should be planning possibly for end of life care or things like that. And we can blend that into your estate plan, make sure that you're going to be covered for those end of life. Because more and more, we're seeing more and more of our clients come in their late 70s, early 80s, and nothing has been planned for that end of life care, that end of life time. And we see people come in terrified that they're going to have to go on Altex, which is Arizona's version of Medicaid, and end up losing some of their assets to the payment of that Medicaid expense. And there are things that we can do earlier in estate planning and financial planning that can help alleviate some of those worries. So we've taken it upon ourselves to start looking at ways that we can build into estate plans, ways to protect those assets and do some asset protection for folks along the road to not only that point, but to retirement and shortly after retirement, and build wealth along with asset protection within the estate plan. So we've taken a very holistic approach to a lot of our planning here.
I really love that, and we can maybe we'll jump back on another and really talk about some of the key elements because there are financial products that are kind of some cornerstones in proper estate planning, like you say, things from basic life insurance through long-term care insurance and those things. So
absolutely.
So I'd love to have another conversation. We talk about the financial products that maybe can enhance an estate plan. But Josh, thank you so much for joining me, being on the podcast. I mean, very insightful for me. Truly a passionate and sad story on your end, but I know it moved you to where you are. And along with my listeners, I'm very grateful.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me on, John.
Oh, you're so welcome. How can our listeners reach you? And your contact information, by the way, I'll also post all up into our show notes.
Sure. So you can always reach out to me at Pennington Law. My email here is Josh, Josh, at penlawaz.com. They can always reach me through that email at any time, or just give us a call at the office at 623-229-0463. I am available at, whenever you need to reach out. If I'm not available, I'll give you a call back or shoot you an email back.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Josh. Thank you to all our listeners. I will be including all Josh's contact information in the show notes, so please feel free to reach out to him. And as always, folks, plan ahead and make it a great day. Thank you for listening. You can subscribe, listen, and download all the Estate Planning Nightmares episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. We'd be grateful if you would save our show to your favorites and share them with others. Remember, life is messy, but death is messier. You can learn more about My Life and Wishes Legacy Vault at www.mylifeandwishes.com. Plan ahead and make it a great day.